Hello everyone and welcome to the RGDS podcast, the show that's always got its nostalgia goggles on. And in this episode we're going to dive headfirst into the very murky waters of piracy. That's right folks, we're peeling back the virtual curtain on the seedy underbelly of retro gaming. So sit tight and prepare to embark on the journey through this nefarious and illicit world of video game piracy. But before that, let me introduce who is joining me in this episode. Obviously I am your host Kingy. First of all, on my left hand side is the Drisk himself.
Hello.
Old Driscoll, Drisky. Hiya, mate. Oh, there. He's even got an eye patch on. It's on the wrong eye, though. One-eyed Willie, for sure. And he's back. It's been ages. The twat himself. It's Retro Rick. Rick.
Ye are Kung Fu.
You did say Kung Fu there, yeah?
How's it going, guys? You all right? Good to be back.
Oh, it's good to have you back,
Good to have
mate.
you back. You been missed, dude.
Oh,
Yeah,
thanks,
good.
man. Thanks.
And it's good to be in an episode, the three of us. One more person can join us, and I would change the title of this episode and make it the best of 1988. Maybe soon, eh?
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, so how's everybody been? I'll start with yourself, Drisky. Obviously, we were at Arcade Club. Sorry you couldn't make it this time, Rick. How great was this year's Arcade Club?
Oh, it was amazing. It was great. I mean, it was loads of people came. It gets bigger every year, isn't it?
Oh, it's incredible.
And just everybody's a pleasure, a genuine pleasure. Everybody gets on really well. It's that right balance, isn't it, where everybody has a chat around the table, but there's 90% of the time they're on the arcade machines and playing some two-player. It's just great fun.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd like to thank everyone that made the effort to come.
Oh.
I know it's not cheap. You know, hotels are expensive. They went really up in price, especially the Premier Inn that we stayed at.
Yeah.
Dr. Goggles, honestly, it's a funny story for him. He was telling me he obviously cheaped out. Cheapy. And you don't do cheap when you go down Bury, do you? You know, so... So basically, he went in a B&B near Manchester, right?
Yeah.
And it was just a bedroom in a woman's house, right? So it was a shared toilet. So I think it was a Friday night after the Arcade Club. We went back, and there's a woman's knickers just chucked on the bathroom floor, you know, when he went in for a pee, you know. So I was like, oh my God. He said he had a quick tin dish and then ran back to the bedroom and locked the door, double bolted it, you know. So yeah, don't do cheating, buddy. Just come to the Premier Inn.
Well,
and,
I just thank you, Kiggy, because obviously we sort of crash together as we usually do when we do this. Bring down the cost, and I mean, because it was almost a year in advance, wasn't it? When you booked it, you said, "Come on, let's book it. Let's book the thing." And I'm like, oh bloody hell, you know. All right, yeah, I guess let's do it. And my God, did the prices go up afterwards?
I'm glad we did, for sure. But I mean, if you share with someone, and I know a number of people did, it does take the bite off it. But it's not for everyone. Some people just prefer, you know, they're conscientious about their snoring. Hi, Gav, or whoever else, you know. But it was a great weekend. There was faces that we've chatted to for ages on Discord that it was the first of meeting them. So my, competitor on our obsession of Moon Patrol Turnbull, it was a pleasure to meet you, mate. It was really great and enjoying playing that game with you. John McManus, he's in Glasgow, but I've never had a chance to go across and meet him. It was an absolute pleasure to meet you, John, and all the other regulars. I can't list everyone. We'll be here till the end of the podcast, listing everyone. But seriously, it was a great weekend. I enjoyed chatting to everyone, playing the games, and unfortunately about the pain in the arse journey on the way home after it, which is always my curse of cancelled trains on a Sunday. Pennine Express, shame on you.
I must admit, actually, it's a lot better since me and Charlie go by coach. We were machines. We were there all day Sunday as well.
I know.
I had a great old time with that. But and Charlie he used my little RG, the Ambernick.
Yeah,
he was playing video games all the way home because he got obsessed. He got obsessed with because I told him about, we watched a video about the nose shoot trick in Gallagher.
Yes.
I don't know if you guys know it, but basically the two bottom left ones, if you don't shoot them, so you shoot everything else on the board, those two, and then you wait about 15 minutes just dodging them, then all the other ships will stop shooting. And he was like blown away by that. So he was trying to do it at Arcade Club, and eventually it was like, and I think the Arcade Club one, it must be patched or a later version because it didn't work. But he was so obsessed with it that he was trying to the point where he bought, the Arcade Archive. He's bought that version of Gallagher, and he's been able to recreate it since. Yeah, but we had a grand old time. It was really, really good, wasn't it?
Oh, superb. So I'll come back to you in a second what you've been up to retro-wise then, but just to give Mr. Yaxley here a bit. Yeah, so what you've been up to? I mean, anything retro-wise you've been able to do in recent months? Anything you've been, enjoying or what?
Yeah, mate. I've been playing quite a lot of Ninja Saviors on a Switch. It's like a remake of the old SNES Ninja Warriors again. I don't know if you've seen it or what.
Yeah, I picked it up in a sale. It's good, isn't it? It's well done.
Yeah, I've been really smashing that because it's got, what I like about the game, it's got it's like a time attack mode, isn't it, mostly? Because the whole game's got like a time limit. Well, not a time limit, but it counts up, doesn't it, how long you've taken to do each level. And I've been trying to have a go at the high score, list. Some people have obviously hacked the game somehow because there's some scores on there that just seem absolutely impossible. I don't know how they're managing to do it. Like the first level, someone's done it in like 80 seconds. And I get to the second, like just the last run before you get to the boss with 80 seconds gone past. So I don't know what they're doing. It sounds a bit dodgy to me, some of these scores, but yeah, really been enjoying that in the limited time I've had to sort of play some games. I've also been playing on the arcade machine here and there. I've got a Mister in there, and got access to the sort of Mister library of cores and stuff for the arcade section. And it's got some of the like consoles and stuff on there as well.
Yeah.
So whatever works on the monitor I've got in my machine, I'm able to play. So I did try the 68,000, the Sharp 68,000, but it doesn't work on there for some reason. I've got a feeling that's a monitor issue. But apart from that, mate, that's pretty much what I've been doing retro-wise, really. Apart from life's ups and downs, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah. How about yourselves, anyway?
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, I can't remember that I mentioned this in the last episode or not, but Charlie bought the Quest 3 VR unit, so that's the new one. So he sold me his old one. So as I did when I got the original Oculus Rift, I gave it as a Prezi. And so having the Quest 2 is really, really good. Great. I mean, it's such a leap up from that original Oculus Rift. And so I'm really excited. It's just finding the time. I'm really excited to be getting back into doing VR gaming. There's that MU VR. I don't know if you've seen it. We've been discussing that, haven't we? Yeah. And to our listeners, if you don't know, with MU VR, it's a homebrew where it recreates the like a bedroom in the 80s, and you can customize everything, posters on the walls. But what's really good is from a menu you can drag out a variety of CRTs, as many as you want, and consoles, and even put the games, which annoyingly aren't in their boxes, which affects me a little bit. So because I wish it was in the box, in particular when it's a disc, because you think, oh, it's going to get scratched. But it's cool because you get that whole experience of like putting it in the console and starting it up on a really well done CRT simulation. And of course, you can do light guns and things. So, I mean, I to be honest, I've not had time to actually sort of dive into it properly yet. But I'm really excited to get into some of these.
I've seen how customizable it is, right? But my issue is it's still very Americanized in that way. You can make the sort of almost ideal teenage American bedroom with all the consoles of the flavors and of the day in American 80s and that there. And I know you can do the other computers and that, but if you're going to be realistic, and I know you can probably really deeply mod it, how shit did our 80s bedrooms look in the UK, right? The wallpaper was disgusting, the carpets were embarrassing, the furniture wasn't even... You couldn't buy a computer desk or a gaming desk, really, or, it was just some shitty thing that your parents got off the tenor or under section in the local press, right? The veneer came off the chipboard. That's all lying there. And You know, just everything else that was so crap about a bedroom in the 80s and this crappy housing scheme I grew up in, you know.
So you want to sit in a crap bedroom?
Hey, if you're going to be nostalgic and get those rose-tinted glasses out, recreate the bedroom how it was. Mould on the walls and...
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, obviously you can do the textures and things. I mean, I guess it's a totally free thing. And this is why I think PC VR is so much better. You know, it's gonna you can stick with it, and you're gonna keep the games that you have, etc. I must admit, I've been really tempted. Have you seen that Seventh Guest VR?
It looks incredible, doesn't it?
Yeah. So, but I'm just too much of a wimp to get it. I think everybody remembers my stories of getting freaked out by the nursery.
Yeah.
I mean, it is they've changed all the puzzles, which is great. So it's not like a complete remaster or something, but it's built ground up for VR, which is really cool. But I am a total wimp. I tried one VR game I did try was called Pixel Ripped 1989. I don't know if you notice that. No. So I bought it because it's a good idea. It's sort of like you're playing on handheld retro consoles, but the world around you is also happening. So you might be trying to play like a Game Boy game with monochrome graphics, but at the same time the teacher, if she notices you've got a spitballer with to distract her and things like that. But I got really freaked out because there's this one level, and this is a game. It's not a horror game. It's designed for kids, really, or like retro lovers like me. But it was in a haunted house because you're playing like a Castlevania game, and every time you look up, there was like a jack-o'-lantern creatures moving towards you, and they always freeze. But every time you look down and look up, they're that little bit closer, just stopping at that point. And I got freaked out with that. So I think I'm a bit of a lost cause with horror VR if I get freaked out with that.
Funny.
Yeah. But yeah, that's what I've been up to. I mean, ultimately, I'm just been struggling with time. I just really want to get into so many things, but it just seems sagged all the time. I think it's part of the weather, isn't it?
And you're getting old.
And I'm getting old. Thank you. Yeah. But not as old as you,
said to me. Yeah.
Anyway, Kiggy, what about you? What have you been up to?
I had all these great intentions of going to play this and going to play that, but bloody Mario Wonder came out, didn't it? And
it does look good.
It's just a dream. There's not a Mario game I haven't played to completion, and most of them I do try to, where possible, 100% them. I was a bit overwhelmed by trying to 100% Mario Odyssey on the Switch because there's just so much returning back to the same levels, more than beyond, obviously, anybody who's played Mario 64, not played Odyssey. There's similar things there where you return to the levels and find so many moons or find a secret under the such and such, all these kind of things. So there's just so many in Odyssey that I didn't really go back and do that. But this one, they really did make the wonder here. It's wonderful. Just the design, the aesthetics, the music, the sheer variety of the levels. And I've just been sitting there with a huge grin on my face playing this. And that's been most of my evenings at the moment, to be honest. It's quite a slouch back on the chair and just play and enjoy. And you do focus in these games, so it does require good platforming skills. But it's just, I don't know, it's just so absorbing and into it. I just lose myself in it. I'm not thinking about playing, it's so hypnotic now.
Just going through,
Yeah, so loving it.
I guess it's, I don't know, it's encouraging to sort of hear, because I was a little bit wary of the visual style. I know it looks it's because it's got that glossy sheen, isn't it? And it looks great animation, but it also kind of looks, not cheap, that's the wrong word, but it looks like, like modern indie games and things like that. Where
it's the vector drawn graphics look that I'm not a huge fan of either personally, but when you get into this, there's so many subtleties and the way the lighting works, it does work for the game. Do I love Mario and Pixel better? Of course I do. I'd rather have done Wonder and SNES style graphics personally, but I know the world's moved on. It's not necessarily a market towards us. So you have to accept it for what it is. And it does look nice in its own way, but it plays so well and so slick that it's up there. It is up there with one of the best 2D Mario games over all of them I've ever played for years and years.
Well, I'll get it then on your recommendation. I was holding off partly because I've got so many games that I haven't played. It's just shameful. I might get it for Christmas. I think that's
cool. Put it in your Santa list. Yeah. One more note, just more pointing towards Rick, was at Arcade Club, mate, and I sent you the photograph of it. Bloody Wardner was there, right at the bar on the top floor, right?
Yeah,
and it was the first game
next to the bins, wasn't it, King?
Next to the bins, it was, and it was funny because all the other listeners kept pointing out to me, oh, look, there's Warner, ha ha ha. You know, I mean, it's going to just become the in-joke of the podcast, that game. Yeah. So a few of the listeners hadn't played it on MAME, but I encouraged them to play it there, and they decided it's shit.
That's fair enough. I mean, I enjoy it, man. So, you know, it is what it is.
You would have loved it being there. I actually pictured you going in your element, you know, standing at it and playing it, because that's a rare thing to see in the wild.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I ain't seen it since I saw it back in the day when I played it on holiday.
Rick loves the chub, don't you? Chubby protagonist.
The guys were questioning the way the level design is versus the physics engine in the game, or the lack of physics engine.
Is this a level design? I didn't know that.
No, there was zero.
I just thought they threw it together.
Pretty much. That's the consensus.
Rick didn't realise he's coming on to a roast session with Rick, isn't he?
Anyway, enough on Warner. Pure Rick. Right. Shall we move on to the main topic?
Yeah, let's do it.
Dodgy and grey, it's not grey, it's the dodgy and illegal area of piracy. Now, video game piracy has came on hand in hand ever since the very first video game. I mean, it's always happened. So if you even look back to Space Wars, Drisky, right? If it wasn't for that game being then obviously inspirational to the world, right? Wow, so the first true video game that comes out. Now, what year was that again?
Oh, God, you're talking...
19 Oatcake, right, 19 Oatcake, that's fine by me. We're very accurate in this podcast for our historical landmark points. And, you know, then you get people that buy it and then they'll just reverse engineer the shit out of something like this. And then start making their own things from it, won't they? That's the whole thing. So they're hacking something to learn from it, stealing intellectual property in that way, and adapting it for their own needs. So I suppose you can call that piracy.
Yeah, I mean, in those early days, it was that all about share and love, wasn't it? It was actually actively encouraged to sort of like hack and that was all of these games, wasn't it? When they were put on like all the games like Colossal Cave and things, that was improved time and time again because,
of course, yeah, because
it was put on these sort of like shared servers in all these universities in America, predominantly in America.
Yeah.
And then other people would say, oh, that's cool, go through the code. And so I guess it's more hacks, but of course it really is from the beginning, isn't it? I mean, as soon as it goes into actual selling of games, when really, I mean, you got those early days, but of course, most famously when it really blew up with like companies like Atari and things. As you say, it's always been a problem, isn't it? I mean, arcade games got cloned, and they used to put loads of tricks to stop the piracy happening. Because you think how many Pong games, for example, got sold that weren't really made by Atari. It's shocking.
Yeah, I mean, all of them were bootlegged like that. Donkey Kong, Pac-Man ones, everything like that. They're all getting hacked to crazy in that way and released, and they're not making any profit from it because they're not the ones selling it to the arcade amusements.
Yeah, well, there was a lot of companies that were making profit in terms of they were basically take all the hard work of Atari or something like that, and then turn around and say, you know what, let's just copy, all the chip designs. And it was the beginning of the cat and mouse, which you always had throughout the whole of piracy, where you got the, Atari were putting in like false documentation, false chips and things to throw them off the scent so it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
That was like the early bit of copy protection. And then, of course, you got companies like GCC, isn't it? Like the famously cloned like missile command of Atari, and then ended up getting sued. But Atari, rather sensibly, rather than sort of bankrupt and ruin them, realised they had something, and then used GCC to create games under their license, under Atari's banner.
See, that's a more clever way, because if you go down the litigious route, right, it's very costly, very expensive, and very, very time-consuming. Now, these arcade games back in those days had a very short shelf life before the next best thing was out. So if they spent so long just battling the rights to protect something that was going to expire in, say, a year's time, was it worth that battle, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. And look, under that sort of, scenario, GCC, in that period, they created Food Fight, which is a real favourite, and they did, obviously they famously did Miss Pac-Man and things. But they went on to successful things during that era. Yeah,
I mean, is any sort of bootlegs you recall from back in the earlier days, Rick?
Oh, blimey! I think it's too early for me at this point. I can't really pick anything.
I think the trouble is, any of us, we were kids, and you probably agree here that we wouldn't have known we were playing on an official thing.
No.
Or not back then. You didn't always necessarily appreciate the artwork like we do as grown-ups on.
Well, I suppose in the UK a lot of the time there were electro coins and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, exactly. So some compatible JAMA-like machine or whatever that these things are in, you don't know what boards are in them. You just went and played them, so you don't know the criminality behind them. All you cared about was playing a game that you loved.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is probably too early, really, for all of us to notice this period.
But it's certainly a good starting point.
But it's an important starting point,
yeah. For me, I think where I first noticed it was back in the days where the software houses were starting to become a bit bigger, and all of a sudden they're releasing their own clones without a license agreement from the arcade companies. So you can imagine Ocean is a good example of that. You had the Crazy Kong, Moon Patrol, which is Moon Alert, obviously. Gilligan's Gold, less obvious, but that's Bagman. There was tons of companies doing that back at that time. Tons. I mean, not mentioning all this kind of Space Invaders and asteroid type,
Froggy and all of that.
Froggy, all that. You know, we never heard of that getting litigious at this point. You know, because I don't know if they were seen as a threat to the arcade. Was it costing them money, or if they're going to play? Because they were quite inferior versions to the arcade counterpart. Was it as much a threat? Did it take coin away from the arcade? It's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, I think with arcade and when it's like physical items, I think it must have. But then when you get into software, it gets more of a grey area, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe that's the thing we come at the end, isn't it? Is what did piracy do to the industry?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but I guess we've got to talk about the industry. You know, talk about the all the eras of piracy before we come to that conclusion.
Yeah, for sure. Tell you what, then let's go to the 8-bit era at this point, then.
Yes,
okay? Because we've all got experience of that, and the biggest thing we can think of at this time in our memories is the whole thing around inverted commas playground piracy, right? There was no crime syndicates looking to profiteer from, you know, copying Outrun or Wonder Boy or Cybernoid or Manic Miner or Jet Set Willy or Horace Goes Skiing, you name it, somebody copied it, right? Now, this is the point back then. So you had the period of the Atari cartridges. Yes, there was bootleg cartridges, not a thing I was aware of. You know, I only ever played on machines that I was exposed to back in the early days of officially bought games. So I never saw that kind of piracy side to it. But you couldn't home tape these, you couldn't home copy these because they were on cartridge. So we didn't have the technology like you have these days with flash SD cards and the ROMs on the internet, but that's for later on. You know, so the cheaper option, right? Because if you look at our friends in America, loading from cassette was just frowned upon. You know, it wasn't a thing. Everything came on discs over there. For us, it was the cassette, and that made it very, very easy to duplicate. For me, I didn't even have a twin deck to start off with. My sister had a cassette player in her room listening to the radio, and I had a cassette player for recording, playing on the Spectrum. So you just used the ear and mic leads and went from output to input, watched the volume levels because you can really get distortion, and you would simply borrow a game or copy off a copy off a copy. You don't know how much generation a copy that you copied that, you know, who knows? But anyway, let's talk about memories of it. So I'll go to you first, Rick, right? What kind of playground memories of piracy or things round about that period do you recall?
Oh, blimey. So I had the Atari 800 XL at this early point, and my dad was quite into his CB radio. You know, he had a big scaffold pole out the back garden that he'd nicked from a building site with a big aerial on it. He was reaching like Russia and all sorts of bloody places. But in his little cabinet where his CB radio was, he had this old school tape deck, and he had another one lying about. I just remember him sitting there like basically duplicating tapes, and all you can hear is like, the only best way to describe it is like a modem loading, and stuff like that. And yeah, it was all about like what tape you was using to copy onto, and what the audio levels were, not only on the recording device but on the playback device as well, to get the right to get the right signal strength for the tape, to noise ratio and all that lark. So in that early period, when I first sort of got into the computer, the Atari XL, it was more sort of my dad doing it for me, you know, and the people he knew at the time. But then as I moved a bit later on with the C64, then there was like I think one of my mates, Matthew, he was one of the only guys who had a Commodore 64, and my mate Barry, who was just up the road.
Was back to Barry again.
Good old Barry again, yeah. And like, you know, we'd just be like swap, like someone would buy, like get their Christmas presents, wouldn't they? Like whatever game it would be. Like I remember one of my vivid memories is Barry got Double Dragon 2, the nice big box version of it for the C64, and because Double Dragon 1 was such a letdown, I like once playing it at his house, I was like, well, gotta grab a copy of this, and I nicked his tape, took it back home. Dad tried to copy it, the tape he copied it onto was wanking, it didn't work. I had to go and get it back again, and blah de blah. So yeah, funny days, man. Like just that sort of, you know, typing in the command, whatever computer you had, to load the new copy tape you just made, and you're sitting there patiently for like 5 minutes or less, depending on what happened. And you knew whether or not the game had knackered, because depending how far it loaded up, the bars would stop moving around the outside of, you know, the loading bars, you know, the flashy squiggly lines, whatever you want to call them. But those are just some of my memories from the time, man. Just great warm fuzzy feelings and funny visions. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Yourself, Paul?
Yeah, honestly, in the 8-bit era, I was relatively innocent of all piracy. It only sort of came later. But I mean, I think for me, I mean, there was definitely tapes that my brother, who's like 10 years older than me, had done, but my brother's never been into video games really. So there was a few ones like Manic Miner and Jet Set Willy and things like that he must have got from school. But for myself, it was like, my parents had sort of frowned upon it really. So at that point, so I was sort of like beholden to, but I guess I came in that era where anyway, there was a abundance through magazines and things where there were all these games anyway coming through. So I guess I had plenty to play. But one of the things I find fascinating about this period is, has anyone watched the Rise and Fall of, I think it was Commercial Break documentary, the Rise and Fall of Imagine.
Yeah.
Because in there, it's a great documentary, which, Imagine was, to listeners that don't know, was like a very famous early 8-bit developer, particularly on the Spectrum. And they basically
blew their load.
Yeah, they blew their load. They basically
on coke and hookers.
Yeah. And but interestingly, the Commercial Break documentary captures it all in real time. But what's particularly interesting on that documentary is you see a wonderful snapshot where they're talking about piracy. It's Ocean talking about piracy, and they go to, I find it particularly interesting because I live in Birmingham. They go to the old Birmingham Bull Ring Market, and you got the guy looking through the old marketplace, looking at all these like dodgy copies of like Hunchback and Donkey, their Kong and all of that. So, but yeah, I mean, for me, growing up in a small place, most of my friends weren't that into video games, to be honest. In the era, they were more into like going out in the woods, like outdoor stuff and that. So
imagine that, Paul.
Yeah, going out. Well, I used to do it, but yeah, I mean, I really miss that. during that early period, it was quite a lonely thing, really, for video games, because most of my friends weren't really into it. Occasionally they played.
I think that's the case for a lot of people, though, man. I think,
I lament that, to be honest, because I'm not, as much as I love being on a podcast and chatting about games, and the nitty gritty, when I want to roll my sleeves up and dive into a game, I love the whole loner syndrome of it.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be a person that does multiplayer online. I love that immersive thing where the family doesn't.
I can't do online. Yeah. No, I can't. I mean, I have done online in the past, but I'm definitely a loner. Although, having said that, I do enjoy, like, when you got, like, recently, like when Charlie comes around and we're taking turns and things like that. That's really, really cool. But and I do have some memories of, like, with video games multiplayer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the main thing I was aware of during this period, though, was all those bloody copy protections when you did get these bought games. You remember the red ink on brown paper and choose a word in the manuals, and it was such a pain in the arse. All of these, like, that lens lock. Do you remember that bloody lens lock?
Lens lock that came with Elite and a few other games, right? What did I have? It was a helicopter one. Was it Tomahawk? Right. By was it Microprose that came out of? Now, lens lock, what a pile of shite that was, right? I mean, for those that don't know what it is, it's a piece of plastic with a kind of prism on it that you folded the legs and it done a distancer space from the screen. So you touch your computer screen, your monitor, and a scrambled word would appear just after the game loaded. So when you held this up, it combined this mess on the screen and gave you a code to type in. 9 times out of 10, depending on the size of your television and all the rest, you just couldn't read it. It's like, I think that's a letter B. I'm not sure. I'll try it. Oh, it was an 8. Oh, well, I'm screwed. And then you got 3 attempts and the game reset and you had to bloody load the thing again. Thing. So frustrating. Very short-lived copy protection. You're right, you referred to the word in the book. That existed right into the 16-bit period as well, where you had a novella or something with the game, and it would go to page 23, word 45. Fuck's sake! Count your finger on. I couldn't count very well, I was like that.
And you're like, "Where's my bloody manual? What have I done with it?"
Exactly. Oh, you gave it to a mate who copied it. His name was Rick. He gave you it back, but didn't give you the book back. Definitely. I mean, I suppose the most iconic one would be the Jet Set Willy colour card. But on Jet Set Willy 1, it was so small, it was easy just to steal graph paper from school and just, colour it in yourself. Then Jet Set Willy 2 came out and it unfolded in about 8 pages, from the inlay. So it was massive. My mate's sister done it all for him, scribbled it all down because she preferred that than overdoing lines at school.
Yeah.
And over the course of a weekend, copied this thing. It's like, oh my God, madness, because I had the original of that. But yeah, the playground thing was good because that's how you started making common interest mates to start off with, wasn't it? Oh, you got a Spectrum for your Christmas, right? What games did you get? What ones have you have? Oh, I've not got that one. I'll tell you what, let's do some swapsies or, and you were trading games. You brought them in your rucksack or your hold. In fact, rucksacks weren't a thing when I was at school to start off with. It was hold alls. And you would haul them out the hold all and, right, what do you want? What do you fancy? You can borrow that for the weekend. And you would borrow their game and you would copy each other's games. But the trouble is, the risk of doing that is they end up blipping your tape. You get it back and you try loading it in again and it's damaged and it's like shit. So you were more reluctant to give games out as time went on.
That's right. Actually, I was just about to say there, Kingy. I remember when I used to do it, instead of giving them my game, I used to give them a list of what games I had. And they gave me their blank tapes and I copied their ones for them from my games and they copied their ones from their games for me.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I had some friends that didn't know how to copy games. Double deck cassettes, which were by far the easiest way to make a facsimile of that. Make sure you turn the graphic equalizers all to 0.
That's right. The line level was perfect for all that sort of stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depended upon who had the skills and the know-how to do this. Because a lot of them, if they were, say, an only child, they might only have the one cassette recorder in the house. Therefore, you couldn't use 2 to combine with the leads to duplicate. So you befriended those that maybe necessarily weren't into video games or were into their music, but he befriended them just to use them for their ability to duplicate for you at high-speed dub. They were the best. So think about it as well. Weapons of choice. What cassette manufacturers did you guys prefer? Brands of cassettes.
Yeah.
So BASF.
I don't. As I say, for me, I was still an innocent, good little boy.
Oh, you shut for a minute then.
But I do know the I know all the ones that the old good old C15 tapes where I had all the dodgy stuff.
See, I did start off with the C15 tapes.
Yeah.
Simply because you didn't really think about copying en masse like you did towards the mid to later 80s. So in the early years, you got a game. Somebody maybe gave you, I don't know, Manic Miner and Attic Attack. So Manic Miner side A, Attic Attack side B. Nice wee case, write with your best handwriting. Had to be your neatest handwriting on this. Take pride in your piracy, for goodness sake. Yeah? write it down.
Actually, I used to make covers for mine. I used to do drawings and.
Oh, I did that later on. Yeah.
I had a mate that had, the Z80 printer that came out on the silver like foil. He would break into the loading screen of the game.
All right.
And print that as his cassette cover for.
Oh, that's so cool. What a cool idea.
It's cool. So when I first went to his house, I didn't get to know him until a bit later on in high school. So they had been doing it since 1982. So I went to his house. It was just across the road from the school. Opened the case. He had, those Fox leather boxes you put your cassettes in, you lift the lid, it clips on, it's like a briefcase, and you open it, it's got the inserts that hold all the cassettes in rows, yeah?
Yeah.
He had 4 or 5 of these just in a row of from the very ancient to the middle period. So, rare games that you did not see in the wild that you weren't able to get your hands on.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? So it was like, yes, remember the one I championed, I always remember first seeing it from him, was Pterodactyl 4D. He was the first person that actually ever I knew owned that game. Never saw it in the shops, never saw it in mail order. It was like your wildest dreams came true, finding this rare cache of, albeit copied games. You knew you could copy these and get them for yourself to finally play after years of looking for them.
Was that the one I sent across, or I stumbled across it? Oh, that's cool.
Yes, that very game that it's still proudly in front of me on the shelf there. That it's just a memory of a game that always eluded me, and now I actually own the original thanks to your good self. Yeah, but
cool. I
suppose that is the trouble, isn't it? That, but like what we're saying about the arcade games, they did have a short window, right? Now, so I suppose, what's your opinion then on this? That the copying window, when it was in the charts, it was just out, so you saw it in Woolies or W.H. Smith, John Menzies, anywhere, or your independents. You saw it there, you bought it, the company made profit, right?
Yeah.
But all these years later, when there's no profit to be made in the game, it's 2-3 years down the line, there's certain games are not even on compilations, retrospective compilations. You can't find it. Like that game, like Pterodactyl 4D. Mutant Monty, there's another game that I sought out and couldn't find. Sam Stote's Safebreaker by Gremlin Graphics. Eventually got that on the hook, off the hook compilation, if I remember correctly. But there was lots that expired their shelf life. So the only way, you couldn't see them in mail order, so the only way to own that yourself was to copy.
Yeah, or to luck out with like magazines when eventually,
but that was at the whim of the magazine. That wasn't your choice then. So how much an impact, would you more say that's more grey area piracy or still just outright piracy?
Well, piracy is piracy, but there is an argument to be said that it does come into the realms of sort of preserving the game and also, maybe it helped other sales. If there's always that argument, isn't it? Is that where it gets the name out there, with for their next game, people say, "Oh, that was, I love that game by company X or whatever, or developer X, and maybe sort of like inspired to get the sequel or what have you.
I think to a certain degree, people who have the money to buy games generally do. But when you haven't got the money, you generally pirate. But then there are people who just pirate constantly. So I don't know. It's a bit of it is a grey area. I mean, I remember when I was a kid and I was buying games for I think it was for the Atari. Probably it might have been the Commodore 64. I can't remember. But I remember used to go into Smiths, WH Smiths or Boots, and I'd go in there, buy a game like a nice $3.99 budget game or something, take it home, copy it. And I'd go straight back and say, "Oh, mate, it don't work. Can I swap it for something else?" And I think I'd done it like 5 times on the same receipt one time, like. And one time I went into Boots and didn't have a receipt at all. Some game I'd swap with my mate and I got bored of it. And I said, "Look, I bought this. It's crap. It don't work."
Actually, I used to know a few at school that used to hear stories of people would like actually copy it, then actually on the original put like a hole or something scratch.
Yeah, make a damage on it.
Yeah, damage on it, and then take it back. But of course the shops quickly sort of cottoned on to that.
Cottoned on,
yeah.
Bloody consumer rights, I'll tell you. I mean, nowadays you get that kind of thing on Steam where you can, if you've not played any more than 2 hours of a game, you can refund it. And the poor indie developers, some of these, small games sold for a smallish price only last about that time. So people were completing them and returning them, So it's just I mean, it wasn't necessarily just our mates that we got our games from. Do you recall other places? I mean, even back in the cassette days, there were some rental shops on the go that, you were able to rent a game for 50p, something like that for a night. So that really ramped up. There was a local one on my high street that appeared, short-lived, mind you, but that really did ramp up the ability of piracy, because
I think their entire catalogue got raped in a couple of weeks and no one rented anything anymore.
Yeah, exactly. The business went tits up, exactly. So, they didn't think about that one too much, did they? Really
maybe it's
good.
slightly different if it was discs and stuff, but tapes, you got no chance. It's like having them in a library, innit, or something,
Yeah.
And like you had alluded to as well there, Paul, with the dodgy markets, and especially in big cities, they tend to have the flea markets where there was always a stall that would sell pirated games. And that went on right through the eras. More about that on later ones. I've got some tales to tell about the famous
dodgy
Glasgow
Borough markets.
Actually, I was going to say, because of the that documentary you mentioned earlier about Imagine, I can't remember the name of it now, and they went to that market, like you say. He showed you the difference between like a sort of dodgy, sort of photocopied one, and then some group had put some effort in and actually printed them and made them look really legit. I used to go to a market in Welling now, remembering that, where I used to buy games. I don't know if I bought any bootleg games back in the day, because if they look that good, to me back in that day when I'm not so sharp on the old graphic design and stuff like that, I could have bought many bootlegs without even bloody realising. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
I was running out of cassettes for copying at one point that I used to steal my brother's even his music from his car.
That's what I did to my dad. I nicked his country tapes.
You put. I even couldn't find bloody sellotape, so I put an elastoplast over the bloody lug. Just to copy it. So, and these were the originals that we taken, not necessarily. It was like, I've got this game.
Need a tape.
Need a tape, and I'll go in and steal one of my brother's Simple Minds cassettes or something like that. And, promised you a miracle. Yes, you did.
Forget about me.
I'm not with copying, but I did that with my sister's Beatles tape. She still mentions it because suddenly you got the Beatles singing, and then suddenly it's me singing. I'd recorded, so I had a microphone. So I was like, yeah, she still remembers that and reminds me. I ruined.
I think we've all done that to our older
yeah.
siblings. Yeah, I done that to my brother. Me and my sister actually did that with my brother's one for another one. Bites the Dust. He had the cassette of Queen's Greatest Hits. So it went dum 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 dum. Stephen is a prick.
Brilliant.
Dearie me. I forgot about that. I completely forgot all about that. But I think you touched on it yourself there, Rick, just to sum it up. The trouble was you had finite money, right? And yes, when you had money, you did go and buy an original, but you had to make an informed choice where you're relying on the magazine reviews, word of mouth, or something that appeals to yourself. That's the game you keep your money for. So the latest, arcade. If you were a guy that liked arcade conversions, Chase HQ's coming out. Check the reviews out. I love that game in arcade. I'm going to spend my money, and you did. But that was finite, like you always said, Paul. Birthdays, Christmases, maybe Easter if you don't want a chocolate egg.
Yeah, I always got video games instead of chocolate eggs. So.
Yeah, that was a good idea. I missed a trick there.
Yeah, I've seen your teeth, mate. So the trouble is then when you're bombarded by choice, right? The Netflix generation wouldn't really understand of seeing all this choice, but you want it but can't really have it. That's the reality. So was it likely that the games you copied were those that you were never going to pay for in the first place?
Oh, 100%. I mean, even every time I hear the argument with piracy and you hear, so many billions or so many millions has been ruined by piracy. It's like it's false maths. Even as a kid, I knew it was false maths because there's no way that, this is coming into the 16-bit era for me, but there's no way that you would buy all of those games. In fact, there's an argument. And it's interesting to see with Game Pass because people are using the same argument with Game Pass. It's ruining the industry. It's, because streaming services is doing the same thing. It's giving games effectively for free, isn't it? And things. But the reality is when you look at a lot of games actually sell really well. And this is the other counter argument of piracy is it actually gets the game noticed. I've always been like this actually. If I really liked a game,
I was just about to say that.
Yeah, I would buy it. And sometimes it would encourage me, when you got onto like the big hitters and the 16-bit era for me, like Team 17 and Bitmap Brothers and things, it got to the point where I was buying that game because of what I'd discovered from previous games, how good they were. So you sort of,
I had a vast collection of originals. Beyond probably what most people would have owned. If I kept it and didn't sell it all, and there's a bit of pang of regret, but I don't have the space for that. I would still be up the attic, you know what I mean? And the extreme temperatures would have killed the cassettes anyway. So I made a lot of money, as I said before, and built my first PC from money. So, I had a first bought PC. It was shit. I learned the error of my ways and then went on eBay and sold all that stuff. So I certainly contributed to the industry greatly, probably more than ever, because I loved this period of gaming more than any other. I still love it now, don't get me wrong. You may argue now's the best time because you've got every game retrospectively to play.
But there's something special in your childhood, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the childhood computer, like you for the Amiga and the Spectrum for myself and the Atari 8-bit for Rick. It is the magical time. It made you the gamer that you are. And but in terms of copying, you're right. If I liked it so much, it was like the Ultimate games. I copied them and then I liked them so much, so I'd buy the original of Nightlore and Underworld, and because they look great. The physical copy does look great. The artwork, especially the artwork. Nowadays, modern games, they don't give a toss about the artwork because most of their sales are through digital. And even if it does, you go into CEX or Game, which are pretty much our only choices in the UK these days.
Yeah.
And you're looking at the boxes. The boxes don't sell the game, do you? You go in looking for a game you know exists now, rather than this kind of serendipity of, ooh, I like that artwork, I'll buy it on the basis of that, or the blurb on the back.
Well, I think to a certain degree, modern stuff, everything seems to be homogenized now. Like all the artwork looks very similar. Yeah. There's not really much to differentiate one game from another, if you get what I mean. Like back in the day, there was lots of different art styles.
Fantastic
quirky, art. Well, lots of art styles stuff. If you were making your own covers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
I bet it was all muscly men.
I did like my Dragon Ninja cover. That was banging.
Cool. But, do you have any? Did you keep any at all?
No, because I did them and I gave them to my mate. So I never kept any. But it would have been. See, that's the only downside. It's like it would have been lovely to have had smartphones back then, even though I bloody hate the thing. So you could have took a picture of your artwork, say, or whatever you didn't have, silly things like that. But I guess that's what makes this magical in a way. Is like because we didn't have like instant bloody photos and stuff like that, all these memories that could get lost to time, you know, it's nice to document them, isn't it? Because, you know, these sorts of things never happen now, really. You know, you just, I know we're skipping forward a little bit here, but it's just where's bloody internet downloads and you play a game and throw it away, and, you know, most of the time you play the game and it's boring, you don't go back to it, do you know what I mean? But now I don't know, it's just it's a very interesting topic for sure.
Definitely oversaturation is the issue of today's world.
I mean, the market was saturated to a degree, like my point then is there was just too many games to choose from, and the glossy magazines like, you know, Crash, Your Sinclair and Sinclair User, they bombarded you with full page advertisements, praiseworthy, well-written reviews that just made you want and desire a product. You know, and you felt like that little mank, what's his name, Charlie Bucket, his parents had fuck all, and you were staring window licking at the shop at computer games hoping you can get a golden bloody ticket. You know, the golden ticket for us was the Memorex, the TDK, the Ema Boots cassette, or...
I mean, I just, you know, on that documentary you was talking about earlier, like was it the distribution? Because I watched it today, but because I hadn't seen it before, and the distribution company, I think that would have they used to have talks with the game developers like Ocean, etc., and they only used to admit like 100 games. I think it was either per month or per quarter or something silly like that, and they used to reject like 500 games, you know, in that period. Like, so what happened to those games? Were they all like you know, in the back ads of the magazines, you know, PO Box me and blah de blah? I don't know.
Call me.
Yeah, I think a lot went. I think a lot went to the wall, and of course, because even in the era of, I mean, the big period for me when the 8-bits was the covered disc or cover tape golden era, where you were literally buying a magazine and you'd get like 8 games often. It was ridiculous, really. It was
the 8-bit period was really great for that. I think it was a great time.
That was good for the cash-strapped person. Because you always kept money for the magazine where you had a subscription. Your parents were willing to. Well, towards the end, was it £1.50 towards the very end period, something like that.
Yeah, around about that.
Yeah. But to get the quality games on them that had long had expired. I mean, because it was like the last gasp for the company. They would have entered an agreement. Well, we'll give you, you know, so many £1,000 for this game on the cassette.
Yeah, but you see, that was great for my age bracket because I hadn't seen these games or weren't aware of these games when they first got released. So it was. You know, I didn't care as a kid that, it's a few years old, or I've, like you probably had played them and had dodgy tapes of them.
I mean, they were good. There was the occasional things, and I still got fond memories of them because I felt cleaner loading them from that than the dodgy tape that I had, if that makes sense. Yeah, it felt a bit more legit, so I was more inclined to, I know it's on, you know, Mega Hits Vol 2 or whatnot, and then you would use that.
I was finding the right place, though, wasn't it, on the tape?
I know. I mean, that's the trouble. I had a stupid mate saying, well, why can't they come with the position on the cassette? I goes, each drive belt's different on each cassette player. It stretches, it changes. Even if you used the same cassette player, and once the rubber band starts vulcanizing, it'll be in a different, it'll be a thereabouts position, but it won't be exactly at 2-3-3 every time. Honestly, thick as shit. Some people try to explain to them these things.
Although I did used to write the actual rough position. You know, when you go through the tape that you got. You try each one and you write down, like, you knew it would be, to say, a rough position.
I done a different thing with my copied tapes. Yeah. I done that thing where you kept your finger on the play button and just hit.
I was about to say that.
Cue it. You knew with the tones, and it was quite a bit more abrasive to the tape doing that because it keeps running past the head at a higher speed. But to be honest, I don't think it ever damaged the game. Nothing worse when it chewed on a dodgy cassette. Oh no!
I think what I used to do was I used to start loading a game, so you'd get the coloured bars around the edge of the screen, and I'd do what you were saying, Kingy. You'd hold the play and fast forward buttons sort of half down so that it'd engage the head, but fast forward at the same time.
So that's the trouble with Commodore. Muted a lot of the loading sounds, didn't it?
No, but you could see the bars moving, so when it got to a bit of the tape that was silent, it stayed a solid colour. I knew, all right, that's where the next game is. And reset the computer and crack on.
I had a tight-fisted mate that real estate on a cassette was precious, right? He would only leave like 2 seconds between the games, right? I kid you not, right? Just so he can squeeze another one in at the end, right? But my God, when you got his, so you maybe wanted to copy the third game that you didn't have on his copied cassette, that was a pain in the arse. You had to load the game on and stop it. Right, I'm going to. That's it in the position now. Oh, nuisance.
See, I wish I was more of a pirate during this era, because I think I would have loved. I mean, we've all done it, like with music tapes where you create your own, doing your own compilation.
Drisky, I've made you a mixed cassette for the Spectrum.
That kind of, it's a good period. But that's probably why I didn't really get into it. It was only into the 60-bit era because I really was being bombarded with ridiculous amount of games through magazines and stuff, really.
Well, on that note, let's go to the 16-bit era.
This is when I become a filthy pirate. This is great. So I've said the story, obviously, when I've seen the Amiga for the first time around a mate's house and, tried some of the games they had. But they immediately introduced me to the fact that there was these things called ways to copy, like the infamous X copy that was wonderful, which was to our listeners, it was like it was just, you could use the same disc or if you had multiple discs, and you put it in and you would see the zeros going clunk 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 as it fills in
screen.
That was a game in its own right.
It was. I mean, it became quite obsessive. So I went. I mean, that was one of the reasons I really went towards the Amiga. One, being impressed, but it was part of my sales pitch and everything. Was I knew I could get free games. I knew that once you made that incredible outlay of the Amiga, I would have some ability to get easy access to games, which was like a revelation to me. And I'm probably like many of your memories. Initially, there was, as you say, on the schoolyard and things, playing. People come up, and I remember distinctly someone coming up with Speedball 2. I remember that, and he was charging more for it because it wasn't really a friend, but he was like saying, "Oh, it's worth it." It was like I had to like pay like my dinner money to get this game, and those sort of early days of getting some of these games. But for me, the later period of, well, I say later period, still very early on in the Amiga, was so there's that. I know I've told this story before, but there was that completely eye-opening situation. There was a mate of mine, Jamie McDonald, and he phoned me up and he said, bring as many floppy disks as you can, blank floppy disks as you can, and come to my house now. And what it was is his cousin was like a full-blown, major pirate, probably making a business out of it, and had left him because he was going on holiday. He'd left him for the entire weekend his entire collection. I mean, we're talking wall to wall. I mean, boxes after boxes of every game you could possibly imagine. And well, I remember after seeing what was there, I rushed out and used every last penny to buy as many additional blank floppy disks, and I already had like 100, but I went to the shop to buy even more, 100 disks I'm talking about. And we spent the whole weekend, like I arranged with my parents, can I stay overnight and things, and we just stayed morning to night with X copy, only one disk drive, copying every single. That
bloody disk drive would have been knackered by the end of
the
session.
Bloody hell, yeah, we went through. But it was just such a wonderful experience because it was like, at that point, and then obviously I discovered things later on, which I'll come to, but after speaking to you guys. But at that point, it was just unbridled amazement that you literally, any of these games, there's a Jetson game, I've never heard of that. Let's copy it. And we were just like choosing often by just the names, we weren't even bother trying the games because we're just, it sounds like it's a cool name. Because we didn't want to cut time of actually getting into games. We just wanted to play, to copy them. And I came away probably on the back of that, just in that night, probably with about 200 games.
Holy moly.
Yeah. Whole weekend, we didn't sleep. We were full blown on. But I mean, I'll come to some of the things I sort of went on to do.
That disk drive noise must have been clicked into your brain.
To be honest, it was sending us absolutely loopy. But there was that excitement. You knew, despite the effort, you knew that it was just worth it because every single, when it got to the end of that X copy, you knew that you're on a winner. You've got a game that you can enjoy and play in your hands.
Which option did you choose on your X copy then?
I'm trying to remember now.
I think I used to use Nibble all the time.
Oh
just
yeah,
to make
Nibble.
sure.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, remember that. Yeah. Yeah, sometimes I think we did risk it with because you wanted quick copy. But yeah, right.
I think
Nibble.
the reason why I use Nibble a lot is because if you had a dodgy sector on the disc, sometimes it could recover it.
Yeah.
But that's what they did put on some of the cassettes. Sorry, I'm still on cassette land, guys. I apologize.
Yeah.
That was one of the anti-piracy methods, wouldn't it? We put intentional damaged sectors on the disc, so conventional copying methods wouldn't duplicate it. But there's this thing is, if you're broken or not, you're getting copied the way you are, and that's it. You're coming on.
I mean, these were all. A lot of them were like properly hacked, because you used to have those wonderful cracking intros at the beginning.
Crack trays.
Yes.
Crack trays.
Well, this is the whole thing. I mean, I suppose you had all the crack houses back then, like Fairlight, one of the longest running
ones.
One
of our favourites.
Oh, yeah.
What I tell you what I liked about Fairlight in the later days was, do you remember the blue Fairlight logo, which was like a dark blue light blue theme?
Yes.
And you could press the right mouse button and get the game to run at 60 hertz.
Oh yes, yeah.
That was banging. That was for some games it worked really well. Like the slower ones, it would speed them up a bit and make them a bit more playable as well.
They were
you some tough with a posh monitor, were you?
No, I think I don't know why my CRT worked. It just did, luckily.
Cool.
But I think I had like a Japanese CRT back then. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's cool. I mean, yeah, they did like amazing things, and of course you got like all the trainers at the beginning as well. I mean, often even if I own the game, because of all these copyright protections and things that used to, I often used the pirate game version of it, even though I owned it, because
or it came with a trainer.
Yeah, because that's it. It came with a trainer and a lot of the crack intros. I mean, do you remember there was Crystal Cracked? You used to have that little chicken in the egg come wandering out. Yeah. And you used to have amazing music at the beginning as well.
Oh, I can't remember which one it was now, Paul. There was one that's got one of the Outrun tracks in Amiga mod, like a remix version. I think I saw it on YouTube recently. I'll have to dig it out for you, but a really good version of one of the Outrun tracks on that, on that menu.
Actually, you saying about Fairlight and that. There's the Retro Hour did probably a couple of years ago now. We'll put it in the show notes. They did an interview with Galahad, who is like one of the main Fairlight crackers.
Yeah.
And famously, actually, more recently, he was the one that they brought that Party Squad. Yeah. On the Amiga, he sort of used his hacking skills to get it working. Or bring it across on the Amiga, but that was fascinating because it was a part of the world that we never saw. I certainly wasn't at the age where you had like these crack meetups, demo scene meetups, where all these people were trying to outwit one another, and they were doing things like reaching out to. Basically paying money to reviewers when they got preview copies, so the copyright wasn't there, and then they would they would basically use that to do the cracking, and it was all a race against time to get these games out before their peers, these other cracking houses.
They had all sorts of contacts, didn't they? They had contacts inside duplication factories and
It's amazing, sort of like world, and it's amazing what they were doing, and I certainly appreciated it.
The thing is with these guys or any of the hackers, a lot of times they were getting their hands on the games before they were even released. Into the shops. Now, the trouble is back then, and this is one of the problems that I probably would touch on, that fueled piracy is regional sales, right, rather than universal sales, or simultaneous international sales. So a game might get released, or we'll release it in Spain first because we've got a big following, and we won't release it in the UK until a month's time. That's just the wrong way about it. Then the hackers would get it. They would crack it, do whatever else, and you would either, like we said before, Paul, you go to any of the local markets, go to Dodgy Dave selling the the catalogue of games you can choose from, and walk away with these games for a very cheap price. Of course, it was very tempting.
It took them a long time, didn't it, to decide that we're going to do worldwide releases. I don't think that sort of happened until the 2000s, did it?
It was quite difficult
and beyond.
To do that. Yeah. But I mean, I never actually had the dodgy ROM market. I never had that because growing up in a pretty small place in Somerset, you didn't really have. Or I certainly wasn't aware of like dodgy ROM markets or anything like that. I used to do the way I got most of mine subsequently, if it wasn't off people at, on the schoolyards, and that became a pain because I tended to get a lot of these games, and I made a point. I've got this weird sort of two-faced morality thing where I was getting all these games for free, but I would never charge anybody for it. You know what I mean? But it did get to the point where I was it was getting crazy. I was spending most of my evenings copying for friends because obviously I had those like masses of games from that single weekend. And then I also got involved. Do you remember you had the disc magazines? There was a variety of ones. The ones I particularly loved was Grapevine.
Yeah.
Well, on there you used to have like cracking addresses and and I also got like contacts through my mates and things. So I was getting the games from, typically friends of a friends and things. People that knew, and used to get them in the mail. And it used to be really exciting, and I don't know if you guys did the same thing, but I used to learn all these tricks to save on the stamps because it got really expensive because you're obviously posting all the things. So one of them was like the one I tended to do was like you do a big parcel with all the things, and then you put the stamps, and then you wrap loads, so it looks like it's just random, loads and loads of sellotape, and then you put clear sellotape over the stamps. Yeah. So when they do the stamp, you can just wipe it off with lick your thumb and wipe it off and use it again. So that and there was ones that didn't work.
That's double piracy, mate.
That's double piracy. Yeah. There was another ones where like clear stick glue. I never found that worked as well. Sometimes it will work. And the other one that they used to do, which never really worked for me, but I guess it was all right if it was a local thing, relatively local, is you'd put a fake address, and then on the back you would write the address you wanted it to go to as return to sender, and then you wouldn't put the stamp on. and I'm
going to try that one now, mate.
Yeah. So there's lots of ways, but for me, the sellotape one was one that I tended to use because you could, you imagine a big parcel and you'd put loads of like tape, and you'd use the packing dark tape everywhere, but just over the stamps you would just put the clear tape, and it didn't really. That was a solid one. That was, but that's how I got all my games.
And follow Paul on Twitter for more money saving tips.
It's like Viz top tips. Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I was in my element with all of that.
Yeah. What you've kind of conveyed here, though, at this point now, we went from playground piracy to a subculture,
a cottage industry,
a cottage industry,
and it did get ridiculous because you would literally, it was getting to the point where you were getting. More games like today's world. Really, there were more games than you could play, and and I do kind of regret it in some ways. I quite envy, when you hear people that come from a console background and they had that one game and that's all they had for like a month or two, and they steamed it and they learned everything about it, and there's a certain enjoyment with that. And
of course there is, yes.
Yeah, and in my and I guess it's the world we live in now. It was the same for me then, even in the Spectrum and then the Amiga. Mm-hmm. There was just so many games that you ended up doing what we do on emulation devices today, isn't it? You sort of like, I'll play that. Oh, that's really good. You might play it for like half an hour. and then you put it back and then you try something else. And there was only a few games that you might be glued to for longer periods. Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly like UFO and things like that. But again, if I did play it for longer periods, I tended to buy them.
I mean, go on.
No, I was going to say, do you remember that the RoboCop 3 dongle protection?
I was just about to go on to dongle protection there. Yeah.
They're proudly, it's going to end piracy. I think they released it even before it. before they even
challenge. But that's the trouble. These crack teams like the challenge of circumventing all the copy protections. You know, it wasn't about profiting from the thing, right? It wasn't to fuel, you know, where they like to scare you. If you're buying pirated games, you're fueling sex trade slaves and you know and drug cartels, and it wasn't like that. It was just somebody in a bedroom having a bit of fun, cracking it.
Yeah, it really was the chase, wasn't it? It was the challenge of the intellectual challenge of hacking this game first and then getting that game out there. I mean, I certainly know from my experience, and I guess it was like a friend of a friend that I predominantly got. I mean, but no one ever charged me. I mean, they would charge for the, you know, either I'd send them blank discs or they would buy the disc, but it was always at cost. You know, they weren't interested. And I likewise passed that on to, you know, people in the school, but it was a pain because I never had a second disc drive, and it got to the point when I had to start saying no to people because it was just swallowing up all my time copying
it's a
games.
long time. I was lucky back in the day because I did, my old man, when he got my Amiga for me or for mate, I did have a second disc drive, so that was kind of, you know, obviously he got it from the same guy who we used to visit, who had the bulletin boards back on the Atari 800 XL days, you know, downloading games in a flash and all that lark off the bulletin boards. But something that probably we haven't mentioned is the bulletin boards. But it's crazy times, man.
So how is that? How you got your? How do you get your games then, Rick?
Well, okay, so back in the day, just as a side note, like the X copy was kind of revolutionary. I know there was some sort of rudimentary copy things back on the 8-bit systems. I remember my dad, he had this piece of software on the Atari 800 XL, which it would only work for sort of single load games, not these multi-load games. What you do is you'd load the game into memory, and before you loaded the game into memory, you'd have like a little program that would run. And then when the game finally loaded up, you'd press buttons to freeze the RAM and then drop that RAM onto a floppy drive, onto a floppy disk. And that was one way to pirate the game. But nowadays, not nowadays, but in this period, with the X copy thing, it was so amazing that you could literally just load up this thing and just throw discs at it and copy things, you know.
I mean, it always had to be hacked, though. I never found that original ones ever worked.
No, because there were so many devious copy protection things, weren't there? Like Kingy was saying, like with like either dud or no DOS sectors on the disc, or they do some funky stuff where they'd like hide different bit rates and stuff in the disc and density values that the program would read, and that would stop the game from loading if it was a copy, because the copy programs couldn't run it and that. But it's such an intricate area of gaming that doesn't get talked about enough, because you know there's so much nuance there that it's just lost to all these like mentalists that were basically sitting in their bedroom with an action replay cartridge or whatnot, trying to read the code, basically to read the bloody machine code, what was going on, and dabbling, you know, because I think that Galahad, he was using action replay just to read the 68,000 code, you know, the assembly code, and that's how he learned how to do programming, just by like dabbling, like putting different arguments in and seeing what happened. You know, it's a really crazy time, and it's just I'm quite really nostalgic for this period because it's just so sort of Wild West, whereas everything today is just so boring. Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, it was so exciting. I mean, as I say, I know I've mentioned like Grapevine before and other disc mags, but Grapevine was one that really gelled with, because it wasn't just, I mean, obviously you had the cracking links and all of this, but there was just so much. I mean, it felt exciting because there was just, I mean, all of it was bullshit. I mean, you read it, some of it now, it was like, it was just entertaining to read, but I mean, there was so much bullshit there alongside, but it was just exciting as a kid, reading how someone turns into a werewolf or whatever bullshit they would do. I used to love the occult line, but you'd also get things like reviews of every single Twilight Zone episode or something like that. Just exciting. You're right, it felt underground and exciting, and of course,
it felt like you was like nearly like the only person doing this. You know what I mean? Even though you knew there was loads of other people doing it, just gaming still didn't feel like this mass market corporate engine, did it? It felt very much sort of still sort of a cottage level, but obviously there was corporations involved, but it felt closer to home, didn't it, back then? I think is the way I.
And you're still willing to steal from them.
But a lot of this was also important to the gaming world. I mean, you think like, because obviously on the sideline of all of this, you had the demo scene, which very much tied to the cracking scene, and some of the techniques that they've learned from there, like to fit all of this information. I mean that's really where compression routines and everything, and like MP3 and all of this stuff really came, and all the digital video files and things.
That came from the porn industry.
Well,
that was always a funny joke actually, because when I got into web design in the late 90s, early 2000s, the go-to sites to learn like the best JavaScript or whatever was porn sites. They'd always have the innovative bloody tech on that side, but it wasn't a good idea to go there anyway. But like, it was just it was funny. But I mean, just to carry on from your point about where did I get my games from? I think because I was a bit younger than you, Paul. Like I can't remember how many years I am, like 3 or 4, isn't it, or something? I was getting my games as sort of like a 11, 12, 13-year-old from either my mates in the school playground like we did with the 8-bits, or funnily enough, my mum used to work in Lewisham Council, and she knew a geezer who worked there who was basically, selling games in the council offices. So my mum would bring me back a list of what he had. I'd say, I want this one, I want this one, I want this one, I want... And then she'd come back with a disc. And then also, because she worked in the council, she had access to the photocopiers and everything. So I'd get her to I'd get the cutouts from the magazine and almost like repro my own covers together by sticking them onto a piece of paper and say, right, photocopy that for me.
I would have loved to have done I did a couple of like fake covers, like doing my or drawing them. Well, it wasn't so much that. For me, it was like space, because you remember you used to have those like the old
disc
floppy
boxes.
disc boxes.
Yeah,
you'd have like it could fit 100 or 150 or whatever it was, and mine would be like round, and I had like by the end of it, I had like probably about 12 boxes or whatever. So it took up a lot of space. So to have to get like a case or something like that.
Actually, you just sparked off a memory now. I don't know where the hell I got them from. I don't know if you ever see them or if you remember them, but there used to be these like cases for discs.
No, I do remember them.
Were like they were like a cassette case, like the completely clear plastic ones.
Yeah.
But they were just wide enough to fit one disc in.
Yeah, I bought a case. So if I really liked a game, I would do covers for them.
So you had them lined up.
Yeah, but I only had probably about 12 where I bothered to do that. The rest were just like
in the disc box,
as Kingy says, you would like neatly write out.
Always the best handwriting.
And your card writing, handwriting.
I used to have the dividers that would say A B C D all the way through, across all these boxes.
I had one of those big old double-sided disc boxes, and then I had this like one like this sort of cube that opened up at the top.
Oh yeah,
where all my best games were. Like they were the games that I always went back to.
Oh yeah, you used to have those 10
discs.
boxes, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And it had all the save discs at the back. It like there was like a little divider just for like 5 discs at the back or whatnot. And I think they might have held 20 discs. So like 5 discs at the back for save games, and the rest were like all the killers I constantly went to. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No. So, Kingy, what about you with the? Because you mentioned like the marketplace. So, what was your?
Yeah, it was mainly the market and friends, likewise friends that had Amigas. So, and the odd, when you decided to be honest, on the odd occasion to buy the original. But the trouble is, this is where I find owning originals versus copies, the piracy outstripped originals. By a huge ratio, simply because of the abundance. But it was just easy to obtain. The Sunday market in Edinburgh, it was Ingleston Market it was called. That would be the common one, where you go and there'll be a folder to open and you just saw a list of game after game after game, and you go, right, I'll buy that, buy this, get that. And then, you know, sometimes I had a copy-in van in the distance. More on that on the 32-bit period. You go back once a month and go home with a month's worth of games, to be honest, and that tided you over till the next time, and you weren't spending a lot of money. Considering the games were about £25, it was a lot more expensive hobby, and I think that's where the trouble was. The jump was massive between the 8-bit and the 16-bit period. That is like, wow, these games have more than doubled in price what I was used to paying for an original. And I'm working now, so, you know, 1990 or so, right, and onwards. Even my paltry, you know, apprenticeship wages ain't going to cover this, you know, and you're still reading about these great games, whether it be Cannon Fodder, or whether it be Worms, or Monkey Island. Monkey Island, that's the thing as well, we're not just talking about one game for one cassette. You mean 11 discs or whatever, it's like, for goodness sake, you know, so...
I remember Monkey Island 2 was painful, wasn't it? to get that copied for people.
Oh, what? No,
I got my mum to. I borrowed my mate's one, and I took the pin out of the central wheel of the copy protection. I got her to photocopy it for me.
I bet you didn't put it back together again.
No, I did. I want to come.
Oh yeah, that was famous. Yeah.
It was easy to. There wasn't a game that I had my eyes on that I couldn't get. That's how easy and abundant the piracy scene was at this time. There was more games on offer at the piracy scene than your local shops were willing to stock. Yeah. Because at this point you're competing against the consoles as well, and they're taking up a lot more shelf space. People were starting to move away from the home computer, the home micro scene at this point. So it's like, but on a note of that, then, not to take away, obviously not that I had any experience of them, but always drilled on them when you saw them advertised in the back of magazines, was the copying systems for the consoles. You know,
I never
you
tried any of those.
Yeah, but you did see them. They rammed into the edge connector at the top. You rammed the cartridge in, depending if it was a SNES period, it would be a floppy disk you would put in to the thing, or like the famous was it Dr. V64 for the Nintendo. It was you would have a whole CD burning system of it, but you just drilled. They were very expensive, weren't they? It was like £199, £299 for these things. Like, oh, but imagine what you could do if you had that, and rent from Blockbuster and copy these games. But never did. Never no experience in them.
Yeah. Did you have any experience, Rick? I didn't have any experience with those.
Yeah, I had a small amount of experience with one of the devices for the Super Nintendo. I can't remember what it's called now. I don't know if it's a Super Wild Card or the Griffin or something like that. I need to double check that. But basically it was, let me try and think of the year. I think it must have been 93. I think I just come out of hospital with my appendix, and it was summer holidays. And
did you give birth to one, did you?
Did what, sorry?
They normally incinerate them. You came out with, you said you came out of the hospital with your appendix. Is it under your arm? You know, did you give it a name?
Yeah, I did it in a little tube, man, and I carried it around me for a little while, but people started telling me to fuck off. But no, but yeah. So it was a very, very weird. I don't know how to describe it. Like just the period. I've got very strange memories of it because it's a life or death situation. Really, technically, I shouldn't be here, but the miracles of modern science and all that. But I had my favourite computer shop at the time in Orpington called the Computer Leisure Centre, where I used to get all my stuff from. And they had basically the place turned into an arcade in the 90s because of, the likes of Street Fighter 2 and all that lark. But just up the road in a electrical shop, I can't remember what it was. It was like one of these sort of high street electrical resellers, TVs and stuff. I can't remember if I think it was just like an independent, if you get what I mean. They had space upstairs that they had rented to this guy who basically opened an import shop. And it was the first import shop I'd ever seen. In about 93 it was. And before, actually, sorry, I've got my memory mixed up there. Before they rented out the top floor, which was probably office space or something at the time, the company was called Rodrian Games. It was at the back of the electrical shop. And this must have been sort of July, August of 93. And the guy basically pulled out this SNES. And we were all looking at all these games that he had, like on the floppy disks, basically, and like Mortal Kombat was there. So we were playing the SNES version of Mortal Kombat in this shop in like sort of July, August of 93. Obviously, Mortal Monday was September, wasn't it? I think, if I remember correctly, for Mortal Kombat. But it was just crazy. Like I never even knew. Like at the time, it was just blowing my mind that the SNES had a fucking disc drive. Do you know what I mean? And they were loading these games from discs. And of course, like each machine had a limited. Like depending on how much money you wanted to spend, depending on how much RAM was inside the machine, because obviously it's loading from disk. It had to load the disk onto the memory to pretend it was a cartridge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So some games that obviously like Street Fighter 2 that used 24 megabit cartridges, etc., wouldn't run on these machines. But it was just crazy to see, this backup system essentially for the Super Nintendo. And
how long did it take to load?
I'd say it was comparable. It depended on how many discs the game had. Obviously, if you had 4 discs, it'd have to load all 4 discs in to run the game. But if it was just most games, I think, run on like 2 discs. Like 8 megabytes or megabits rather.
Because these things are big beasts that sat on top. So I'm assuming they had their own RAM in them that it loaded
exactly.
From the disc.
It was like a cartridge with a disc drive built into it, basically. That's essentially what we're talking about. And I think you could connect them up to the internet, like via, well, not the internet, but you know what I mean? Like you could use them in some way with a bloody telephone or something to download the games, but there'd be some sort of interface on them to use the bulletin boards back in the day. But that was way beyond where I was with it. But it's just, to me, it was amazing seeing games being loaded onto the console with a floppy drive, and I suppose another aspect that kind of fits in with the 16-bit era for me is Capcom's arcades were very massive at the time, weren't they? And their CPS1 hardware was being bootlegged left, right, and center by like Taiwanese and Chinese, sort of background developers, to the point that they'd made so many bootlegs of Street Fighter 2 that the next Street Fighter 2 that came out, they actually used the ideas that some of the bootlegs came up with to keep up with the market. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
Yeah, because some of the bootlegs were really popular, weren't they?
They were, yeah. Some of them were super fast, or they had air fireballs and all sorts of stuff. And it made actually, just as a secondary point to that, because the CPS1 hardware was so blown open by the hackers and whatnot in different regions.
Yeah.
The CPS2 hardware, which was their next iteration, didn't get cracked until about 2010. It took properly cracked. Like obviously it was a bit earlier than that they were able to read the code off the off the machine, off the hardware, but they weren't able to fully recreate what was going on in the hardware until recently, like 2013, I think it was. It just shows you like how crazy it was that like some companies managed it. I mean, even the Saturn was quite hard to crack, wasn't it? You know,
Right.
I was probably going on a little bit further now, but mad times.
No, you say with the Saturn, it was really, really difficult to crack.
Yeah.
It was.
Well, I'll tell you what. Then let's move on to that sort of 32-bit and beyond era. So, moving on with the 32-bit era, I suppose we can now say we've moved on to the age of the internet.
Yeah.
For the most part of it. And that had a big impact on how video game piracy was achieved on these later consoles and systems. One, because the information was freely out there to read how to do it and go about doing it. Or once internet speed started increasing, the hard drive space became larger, then the downloading ability also became more prominent. But initially then, if we look at our consoles, so you mentioned the Saturn there or the PlayStation 1. PlayStation, I think Sony personally, and I think Sony themselves admitted to it, that piracy itself, wouldn't want to really admit it, kind of helped the sales of the actual consoles itself.
I think so,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so it was easily, obviously there's a couple of things. You had disc swapping methods, which were a bit, hit and miss. But for the hardcore, you bought a chip and either you had the skills to solder or you knew someone, a friend of a friend, someone always knew someone with the skills that you can pay for the price of a game normally, if I remember right, about £40, including the price of the chip, they'd do it for you. It's normally about 6 wires on the motherboard. You go on the internet and have a little look, and there's the wiring diagrams blown up. Right, that pin there, that pin there. It wasn't that difficult. I've still owned my PlayStation 1 that I chipped. It's not broken. The optical drive's not away.
About mine.
Yeah, do tell.
Sorry,
It's kind of it's irrelevant to the chat, but I used to go to this shop in Beckenham called Raven Games, and they were, because it was around the time of the PlayStation that I really got into the import scene. And the whole reason for me getting my PlayStation chipped was because I wanted to play import games. It wasn't really so much backups, it was more to play like the Japanese games, etc. And the fact that, because one of the problems with the PlayStation, for example, was that the refresh rate of the game was coded onto the disc. So if you bought a PAL version of the game, you were going to play a 50 hertz version of the game no matter what. So if you went and got the NTSC U or J version, depending on your preferences, to get the full speed. But my first PlayStation, which I got on launch pretty much, that died within 6 months because the laser just gave out. So I took it back to Comet and got my replacement. But then when the sort of idea of the chips surfaced, I went into, I don't know how I found it now. I think it must have been in a news shop or a local newspaper. Some guy was advertising his services, because I remember calling a mobile number, some random dude, and he came and turned up at my house and chipped my PlayStation in my bedroom for me. And showed me what dodgy games he had in his bag. I think they were £5 a pop or something. And I remember I got Thrill Kill off of him, which was an unreleased PlayStation game back in the day. He said, "This is hot shit, man. You won't get this in the shops." But anyway, just to finish that story off, I took my because the laser right at the end of the life of me playing my PS1, the laser was on its way out. I was pulling the top off the PlayStation, and I was like fiddling with the little pot that adjusted the focus of the laser to try and get it to focus in on all the different fucking copies I had of all the different discs, being burnt on different like burners basically. Yeah. And it was about 2003. I took it to Raven Games to have the laser replaced, and the bloke, when I picked it up, put on the receipt that it was a faulty boot loader or something, and it basically what he'd done is he desoldered my fucking boot chip and replaced the laser and made out it was like a problem with the boot chip, but basically because the guy was so anti-piracy, he ripped my fucking boot chip out. But because I lived in Brighton at the time, I couldn't be asked to go all the way back and fucking have a go at him.
Funnily enough, I did remember reading in the papers there was some arson attack on that building, on that shop. So.
Wouldn't surprise me, mate. He sells bloody metal merchandise now. But he'd be a great guy to talk to, though, in terms of that like this period, because he was well in the, he was getting games from Japan. Like you wanted a game from Japan, you go to his shop and say, "Look, I want this game." He'd get it for you, So I guess that's why he was so big, because he could see his business dying at that point. I suppose he had seen that. Sure. But anyway, back to the topic in hand.
No, it's all relevant. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so chipping was the thing, wasn't it? And it wasn't just that; it became a fine art because CD burners become more affordable. I bought my first one. It was a Hewlett-Packard LightScribe. Maximum speed of probably 2 times, but that was the one where you turned the disc, you bought the photosensitive discs and you turned them upside down, and you can etch from the software the name of the game on the disc. And they went online to covers.cc, and every scan of every video game was up there, so you would download it, put it into your the CD template software of your choice, and print it on your inkjet, your Epson or your Hewlett-Packard, get your guillotine, trim it, and put it neatly in a case. And, you were able to very easily make an original, or as close to the original game, very quickly. There was rental shops everywhere, so whether it be Blockbusters or independents, you were able to get these games for a very cheap rental cost. Buy a big spindle of 100 discs, a bit like yourself, Paul, on about buying as much floppies as you could, and burning the games left, right, and centre. It was crazy.
I remember
crazy
them
time.
Bloody CDs, man, where you get the 100 discs in a spindle for like 10 quid. It was crazy. I had these 2 folders that I bought from Plymouth or somewhere when I was travelling down the southwest at the time, and I just had them rammed full of bloody PlayStation games. It was crazy.
See, I never really did with the PlayStation and Saturn era. For me, it was the you'd see friends do that. You mentioned the disc swap method. I remember it was so painful, wasn't it? Because you'd have to time it. You basically had to make it think that the lid was closed, wasn't it? And then when it booted up, you'd put a legitimate disc, and then when it gone past protection, you'd swap the disc, didn't you? Yeah,
I mean, this you're talking about. You need to be a DJ, right? You needed the fingering skills of Jimmy Savile, right? Oops. Right in the centre.
Oh dear.
All right. Anyway, but yeah, it was hit and miss. It wasn't accurate. You couldn't, you had to keep trying, and that would put strain and resistance on the motor and burn it out. And I think that's what Rick was actually doing. Going through
I never bothered with the disc swapping technique. The only time I used the disc swapping technique was, say, like you load Ridge Racer up, and you'd have a bit of blue tack to hold the button down, and then you whip the disc out and put your own CD music in, like some music you wanted to listen to whilst you played the game, that sort of thing.
Oh, that's quite cool.
Oh, I'll tell you about that actually. Just a little funny one. My good mate Rab, we both had PlayStations at the same time, always up and down to each other's houses. Thursday nights was gaming night. Rab. He went to the loo, and I just saw on the corner of my head these CDs on display. Remember in the days where your living room looked like your bachelor pad, didn't it? And all your CDs were out. And there was Cars by Gary Newman, right? Mm-hmm. He had the CD single off that. So whipped it out, ejected Ridge Racer, and popped it in, because obviously the CD audio was playing in from the discs in that time rather than a chip tune. It's like, check this out, mate. Did you know this one? So the game was paused. I just made it sharp. So you go up, left. It was like a combo move in Street Fighter 2. Up, left, right, circle. Yeah. And then unpause the game, and it's how did you do that? And I never ever told him. Right,
you really were a sit bag, weren't you?
He was trying for years. I was making it up every time. So it's up, triangle, circle, X, square twice, down. Right, I tried. Oh, I've got that wrong. Right, and honestly, it was I must have spun this for about 2 years for him.
Oh, brilliant! No, I mean, for me, it was when the Dreamcast came along. That's when for consoles. I mean, obviously, PC was a different one. That's probably where my focus was. But but yeah, the Dreamcast. Do you remember there used to be Disc Juggler, which is like
CDI, the CDI format, Juggler,
yeah. So I mean, I like you were describing. I mean, once you got into that realm, and you could sort of like copy you had to get the 800 meg.
The extra length
overburn mode.
Overburn disc.
Overburn.
Bloody hell, overburning.
Yeah. And I mean, that was just
not that I know anything about anything we've spoken about.
No, of course not.
No, of course not.
But yeah, I mean, PC. I mean, you're right. The birth of like those early days of the internet and things, and when downloading and things like that sort of came along, it was just it was a wonderful time, wasn't it? Really. Although I must admit, a lot with the PC gaming, I did go back to legit, because there was just so many viruses and so much. It got nasty, didn't it? Like a few years
for a while, yes. If you went on was it CD Wire and BearShare and the old, but if you were in the IRC channels and downloaded from them, you'd more likely get a less, viral copy, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, no, I get you. But yeah, I mean, slightly going back to, well, it's in the 32-bit era with the 16-bit, but I remember, so basically, this is 1995, so just really, this is the first time I've got a PC with internet and all of this, and crucially a CD drive. It was like really, really cool. And I remember a friend, or somebody also at the uni, gave me a disc full of absolutely full to the brim of the Amiga with a burning software. So it was a real pain. You had to sort of like use a transfer to your Amiga to then to get the file onto your Amiga, and then you would burn it through Workbench. So it was a bit of a pain, but that was really, really sort of like cool going back to the Amiga day. I couldn't believe this world where you had like pretty much, not really, but it seemed like it, the entire library of the Amiga on one disc. It just blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind. Yeah.
Actually, guys, do you remember zip drives?
Oh, yeah.
Amiga zip drives.
Yeah, I remember that's how I used to get like volumes of Amiga stuff off the internet like in the late 90s onto my A4000. I found a way to get the zip drive to work as a drive on the A4000, and I was just awesome. I was ripped. You'd use I don't know if you remember on the OS 3 or Kickstart 3, sorry, with the Workbench 3, you'd get like in the drivers folder of the Amiga, you'd get like an icon to click, which basically allowed you to read PC formatted discs. And that's what I was using. So I was like, apart from obviously the covered discs, the CDs you'd buy, because I had a CD drive in my Amiga 4000. You get like the one or whatever it was at the time, sort of in the late 90s when Commodore was dead and the Amigas were on their way out. I was still rocking my A4000 until the very last knock-ins of the 90s. But I remember I had my A4000 hooked up with the bloody zip drive, and I was downloading crap on the internet at work, you know, bunging it on a zip drive there and then bringing it home and, you know, all that sort of lark. So, yeah, great. Just the Wild West, man. I miss those days. The internet is so homogenized and boring now, and it's so fucking bland.
So easy, isn't it now?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. I suppose then, I mean, obviously, as you sort of touched on there, the old PC copying scene, and, you know, the whole key to that was copying over the cracked exe file, wasn't it? It was even websites dedicated to the cracked exes.
Oh, mate, the amount of dodgy wares sites I went to on a 56k modem is no one's business.
Good, I know. It's unbelievable, isn't it? Then it just became, you were saturated, and I think it's back to what you're saying, Paul, that you had so much there then, even via copying, that you kind of self-expired that even though you copied it, the industry didn't lose any money because you didn't even play it, because you just fired up to test that it could play. You'll get back to it and not. So you went from a point many years ago just copying some games that your mates had to the world was your oyster. Everything that you wanted, you can look for that, and you just, because you could. And blank CDs were cheap, or because hard drive storage was still a bit expensive at that point to keep it all digitally, wasn't it? You didn't really get them. You know, you keep your ISOs on a hard drive now. Discs, even your computer now, that's long gone. You don't have the CD drive anymore. Even for your consoles, you'd rather use flash carts and whatnot rather than discs or whatever else, you know. It's all.
Yeah, I think it's weird, you know, like in a sort of late, like 99 into the 2000s. For me specifically, I found that I didn't play a lot of different games because I think the internet.
You're still trying to be good at Wardener.
Fuck off.
Sorry.
I'm getting ribbed on this episode, man. I've come back for a slating. All you wankers who don't like Wardener, you can get lost, man. It's a great game. If you like Pac-Land, you should like Wardener, basically.
Lies.
Anyway, all jokes aside, I just found that I was gravitating to the multiplayer because you know, in that period when multiplayer was opened up and this idea of playing people across the internet just blew my bloody mind. Like, it's probably one for another episode, perhaps. But I spent most of the late 90s and early 2000s playing, like, literally Quake. Like, I wasn't really that worried about anything else at that period. I mean, I did get a Dreamcast. I was doing I bought a Dreamcast because I wanted to play certain sort of Atomis Wave games like, Hakoto Nuken and bloody, the Street Fighter, SNK versus Capcom and all that lark, but and Crazy Taxi. But they were like Naomi basically hardware, weren't they? Which was basically a Naomi board in a bloody console. That's why the Dreamcast was such a good machine. But I find it funny that Sega thought that they had a really robust copy protection system because they were using this GD-ROM. But then like Muppets, they allowed this sort of like multimedia CD format to run on the console.
Yeah.
And you could basically front load all the copied games with this multimedia CD front loading technique. And it was like, you know, the Utopia. I remember having a Utopia boot CD for about 10 minutes. And then I was downloading CDIs off the internet that auto booted. You know, it was done. See, that's what a Dreamcast.
You know what's difficult? What's difficult now is just say you want to play something you've not downloaded on your Dreamcast, right? There's very little things that support that CDI format, and that's old legacy software, the old pad disc juggler now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. But
you're limited to what you can use. Back in the day,
it was just so. I mean, that was the thing. I didn't bother with the Saturn or anything like that to do piracy with. And apart from, I'm probably like Rick, apart from like a few games like your Quake and Dooms and Duke Nukems and things. I bought them because it was like, well, I got so much play out of them. I mean, to be honest, actually on some of the for LAN parties and things, you'd always have like dodgy copies and things or ways to, get it on as many, if mates came over for a LAN party or what have you, you had all the games. But yeah, I mean,
actually, strangely, just on that point, I just had a memory flashback to me there. In my sort of last year of secondary school, which would have been about 96, I found out that the school network, which was using, I don't know if you ever remember them RM Nimbus computers, I
do remember them. Yeah,
there was one machine in the link that had a hard drive on it, and I found out they had Doom on it, and I managed to work out that you could put the Doom executable or something like that into a Word document, and I started sending it to my classmates, and we were in there playing fucking Doom on these computers, and the teacher comes in and goes, "What the fuck's going on here?"
Is that his actual words, was it?
Well, to that effect, basically. I mean, I remember the IT manager or whatever. It was your atypical IT bloke, big fucking beard, looked like he'd come from the Stone Age, come into my classroom and said, "Here, what's going on here, mate? You got executables appearing on your bloody user area." Oh, I'm sorry about that, mate. And he sort of smiled at me and said, "You wanker." Funny days, mate.
But do you remember or when you got the original Xbox? That was so easy to, because that was like I'm unlike Kingy. I struggle. I've always struggled with like soldering and all of that shit. I'm always a bit nervous. But I mean, when the original Xbox came along, and you could, I always used because you basically had a back door, wasn't it? You had Splinter Cell.
Yeah, you could use save states, couldn't you? Yeah, from like Splinter Cell or something like that.
Yeah, so you just the most difficult thing was you had to get the basically the hack onto the memory card. So there was
right. You needed a funny USB setup, didn't you, to get the file onto a memory card sort of situation.
But I mean, thankfully, I had a mate that did that bit, and once it's on the memory card, you're sorted. And then you basically, that would give you effectively like Linux front end that would then you could then put
you into XBMC. A dashboard loader and all sorts.
Yeah. So once you're sorted, and that was like a revelation. I mean, I still love that original Xbox hack. Partly because, well, one, obviously you could even put your favorite games on the actual hard drive itself, and you could even put like a bigger hard drive in, so you could. Like,
that's right. I've still got an Xbox Classic with a terabyte hard drive in it. I know some people bloody use them.
Yeah, I didn't even know it goes that big.
Yeah, no, you can still get IDE hard drives that run that, but I didn't do my mod till like the early 2010s. But like my mate I was living with in house share when I went to uni. I went to uni as sort of like a, what do you want to call it, a mature student. I didn't go till I was 23, but I met like the guy I shared my first house with. He was basically in there hacking the bloody Xbox. So I wasn't that interested in it because I sort of got bored of games to a certain degree at that point. But if later on when we reconnected, sort of in like 2010, 11, he was hacking his original Xbox using soft mod rather than the old solder, the chip technique or whatever it was.
Back in the early 2000s.
Yeah, exactly. And I bought an Xbox off my mate I was living with at the time, and took it down to him, and we soft modded it with the is it Siphon filter? I think it was Siphon filter.
Yeah, the Tom
State.
Tom Clancy's. Not Siphon filter, was it? It was Splinter Cell.
Oh, sorry, Splinter Cell. Sorry,
Siphon filter was a good game though. That's on the PlayStation.
That's right. Yeah, sorry, I got them too mixed up. But it was crazy because I think there's still people today who are running like what do you want to call it? I can't think what the technique's called now, but it's like a jammer to something connector to their Xbox Classic and running coin ops on their on their arcade machine because it's got so many good games running on it. Do you know what I mean?
Well, what's great about it for emulation, it was great as well because obviously with the original Xbox, it had, it had your video out, so into your CRT, it was just like the real arcade, isn't it? And of course, the original Xbox, you could buy, good arcade sticks and things that you could plug in back in the day.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was a great revelation. But I happy memories with that. But yeah, to be honest, I sort of went away. Probably the next time I got involved with piracy elements was probably the DS, the R4 chip, and the Wii.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
What about you, Kingy? What other thing?
Yeah, pretty much the same. The to get the R4 chips for the DS was absolutely incredible because the games were released in batches rather than individuals. So you might get, they were always numbered. 0001 was like Electroplankton, if I remember right, and they would just be released in batches, 100 games at a time. This month, another 100. So you just download them from your usual. It was always Usenet and things like that. I would get them from. So I would have the entire, rather than just a curated collection, which up to that point was. It was probably the first stage at this point where you had everything. Nowadays, everything's up everywhere. And, retrospect to go back and get every bloody game, that. But it was a great time. These flash carts took a good number of games on them, and they worked bloody well. And it was great. It was great for going on holiday. You had a whole collection of games on one thing. I loved it. It was fantastic.
And multiplayer as well, wasn't it? Because often, even with Mario Kart, you were limited to. You didn't have everything unless you had the kart on each device or the game.
No, that's not true. Not with the DS.
The DS
as long as one person owned it, it would clone to all the other. That was a genius thing by Nintendo. Anyway, even if you bought the original, that Bomberman, Mario Kart. Oh, there was tons that you would just connect, and it would take quite a wee bit and drain a lot of battery power. Migrating across to the other, especially if there's 4 or 5 people. But there's nothing better than everyone just I used to always take it on holiday, and I would have a couple of them, and they'd laugh, and other people would have them, their kids would have them, and then it would be all the grown-ups sitting at the bar drinking cocktails, playing Bomberman at midnight, swearing at each other.
I mean, but I was pretty sure that it cut some of the characters. You couldn't play all the characters or something.
It's possible.
Enough's enough for that.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it was. I mean, it was great enough, but it was like, it was. You're right. It was just cool.
Well, I think when you go back in the day of the original Game Boy, I don't think the data connection was there for like the cable, like with USB and stuff. I suppose that's what enabled it. Because these games are quite small on those systems, aren't they?
Relatively small.
Relatively to what else is out there, so they could be dumped from the original cartridge. That makes sense. One thing we haven't spoken about so much tonight is emulation.
That's because we speak about it every other episode.
I guess so, yeah. But I suppose to a certain degree, emulation is piracy.
Yes.
But on the flip side, piracy has kind of doubled up as video game preservation, because in some respects, without the piracy, some of these games may have like dropped off a cliff and the data wouldn't be there anymore, and stuff like that.
Particularly arcade, isn't it?
For sure. I mean, Imagine all the arcade games where the proprietors have got bought, the game wasn't making any more money anymore. But thanks to things like MAME in the very early 2000s, late 90s, and these dumps started to be created. Because I'll tell you what, a funny story that leads into this. I went back with my family to one of our favourite one of my favourite childhood holiday places in Camber Sands in Kent, which is near Hastings, and there's Pontins Holiday Club there, and I used to go there all the time, sort of in my my single digit years, so to speak. And we went for a holiday there in '97, I think it was, just before I sort of got ready to leave home. But we walked down to the seafront, and one of my favourite arcades as a kid, I was walking towards it from memory because I probably hadn't been there for like 8-10 years or whatnot, and it was all burnt down. So obviously they'd done an insurance job there, because the arcades were on their last legs in '97, weren't they? Do you know what I mean? I remember seeing a Street Fighter 1 machine with half the artwork on it and the rest of it burnt to shit. I was like, I could have had that. Do you know what I mean? But like, these machines were like they were on their way out, weren't they, in the sort of mid to late 90s, and people were probably obviously doing insurance jobs. That's what I got the thing from. But the piracy side of things, and the ripping the data from the boards, the discs, the whatever, if these people weren't about, a lot of this stuff definitely wouldn't be there, would it?
And it's like, you were talking about, like with the console, like with the snares and those sort of disc drives. I mean, essentially that's what EverDrives are today, aren't they?
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. And to be honest, a lot of the ROMs probably came from them floppies. In some ways, in the early days of the internet, because it was close to the cusp of people getting onto the internet, the early adopters in the sort of 93, 94, 95, wasn't it? And I'm sure a lot of people dumped them floppies or whatever else onto the internet in some way, using a serial cable, whatever, out of the devices.
So just what you saying, that reminded me of the "don't copy that floppy."
The wife says that to me most weekend nights.
Don't copy last weekend's floppy, son.
But you're right. It's it is important, and it's also, I mean, it's going, all these kind of hacks and things. It's like you got that Nintendo that is keeping the online games of these shops that have deceased, where people can point to that. I mean, I know we're getting more into preservation than piracy,
but it was always going to segue into that for sure.
Happy, but it's an important. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head, Rick. With a lot of these games, if it hadn't been for piracy, probably would have been lost to time, because people did rip them.
Well, I think some of the remakes that have been released in recent years actually come from the cracked versions, because they lost the source code and all that sort of lot. You know what I mean? So it's funny.
That's the trouble.
Ironic in some ways,
Yeah, if a company goes into liquidation and you get these places that buy it, the stuff up, they're not interested in the data in the computers and the storage drives.
What actually happened to Bandersnatch, just to bring it back round to the beginning of the show, because during that because I don't know the story of Bandersnatch that well. I know they released that TV show on Netflix, which I really liked, about the idea behind Bandersnatch. But what actually happened to Bandersnatch? Did the source code get lost? Because it was all on the computer.
No, so actually it became Braticus. So basically,
oh, that's right. Yeah, now I remember.
So basically, the Imagine guys, when they knew it was all happening, they were frantically grabbing all the code
and dumping it somewhere else,
and dumping it somewhere else. Getting it out there, because obviously they were going to lose everything. And it became Braticus, which wasn't a very good game, to be fair. But
no, slightly before my time. I mean, I suppose 85 was when I could say I was kind of like lucid in terms of like my memories, because I was only 5 years old then. But just it's funny to go, because that I didn't realise that Bandersnatch thing linked into the Imagine sort of the breakup of Imagine and Ocean buying.
Yeah, well, that was it, because they were advertising it big style. I mean, it was one of the first vaporware products, really.
They went too far, didn't they? Because they were talking about selling it for 40 quid a pop. And I'm like, I can understand the sentiment. Maybe in the future, if you've bought this game and you've got that bit of hardware, then other games could come out for it. But that's a hard sell back in them days, wasn't it? That £40 price. A bit crazy to do that. I think they spent too much money on Ferraris and thought they were, you know what I mean? They were a bit out there. They were ahead of their time. Let's say that.
100%. But I think piracy always holds a special place in, it's part of the gaming
it's
landscape.
Hand in hand, isn't it, mate? It's in tandem with the industry. It keeps the industry on its toes, and that's probably why we're in so much trouble today with the industry and why it's going down the toilet, because they've got like one hacker on the scene who can crack this silly DRM they've got going on in the games today, Empress or something. The modern games have got this sort of DRM that not many people have been able to crack, but she's the only one who's been able to crack it or something.
But what's bad about the new DRM methods?
It slows down the performance. It slows down the performance
of the games. Yeah. So and they're not giving any impetus to. Like, I suppose it's almost like the lens lock and the things we were talking about. They're punishing the wrong people. The people that buy it,
people who actually want to play the bloody game.
The people that buy it legitimately are the ones getting punished.
It's not a thing you see as much now. I think you said people have a bit more disposable incomes now, and with Game Pass and with games relatively going cheap very quickly within a small window, a 40 quid game within a month's down to 30, give it a couple of months. You're too busy playing the current games you've got that you don't need to get the new game out now. Give it a few months.
All the games you bought 5 years ago.
Yes,
exactly.
I don't bother with piracy nowadays just purely because you're absolutely right. All I do is if I like a game, I'll put it on the wish list, and at some point it's going to come up in a stupid sale.
Yeah,
and then you pick it up on the PC.
And at least then, no matter the price it sells for, if you buy it through legitimate means like through Steam, the money still goes back to the developer.
In some ways, Steam killed the games industry. Because there's not that window anymore of like making maximum profit, because people sit there with the game on their wish list until it comes down to a silly price. So it's all swings and roundabouts, isn't it?
Well, I think the thing that killed it more is oversaturation, because it's direct to direct to app. It meant, like going back to what you were originally saying, like of that Commercial Breaks documentary with the rise and fall, they were only choosing a small select because it's a lot of money to get it into the shops. Whether now, any Tom, Dick or Harry can
release something
and get it out there.
In some ways, that's the beauty of the internet, isn't it? That people can just release a game on their own website. Still, it's not quite as cutting edge as it was back in the 90s, but it's still there, I suppose. The Bedroom Coders still release games for the old systems and that on like either your Kickstarter.
Well, I think the Bedroom Coder is very much alive in that way with itch.io and anywhere else. And even if they do want to pay the Steam fees or any other place, they can get the game out there, but it's getting it on the front page. And like you said, with saturation,
it's oversaturation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Do you remember that? I don't know if you ever see that documentary about the guys trying to make games for the Xbox 360. It was about 10 years ago. It had the guys who made Super Meat Boy and that guy who was making Fez. It's a really cool documentary about their struggles.
Indie game.
That's an indie game movie, was it, or something? Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's a really cool. If you haven't seen that,
it's good. It's really good.
Give that a good. Give that a go. I think it's called Indie Game Movie, isn't it? If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Give that a go, because that was really cool for the 2010s period, I'd say, or the early 2010s period. But I'm kind of with you guys. That I feel like this is kind of, you call it controversial if you like, or elitist. I kind of feel like, although I loved certain aspects of the PS1, I feel that the PS1 pushed gaming into the modern cultural zeitgeist. It turned it from being a sort of isolationist hobby into a sort of commercial juggernaut in 5, 6 years, 7 years. And I think that, in my opinion, I think gaming's suffered for that reason. I think perhaps, it's naive to think that something like that could stay in the underground and be a sort of niche hobby for this long. But I just feel that it's like with everything, be it movies, TV, blah, blah, blah. I feel like it's oversaturated because it's become such a bloated industry now that it's kind of hard for me now to find the gems amongst the trashy.
Yeah,
is the way I'd say.
I think it's more the internet rather than the commercial. Because we live in a world now, and this is the same for movies and everything. Because it is so easy, because it's been democratized, and it's anybody can get whatever it is, whether it's a movie, a game, or whatever it is, to people. And on a global scale, and that's wonderful on one point. But you're right, the negative part of that is you just get total oversaturation, where there's some amazing like bedroom coder and indie developers and all of this that are doing blood, sweat, and tears, and
the product's not getting out there to the masses.
It's not getting exposure.
It just doesn't get noticed
because of these algorithms on the homepages of all the gaming clients, whether it be Game Pass, whether it be Steam, GOG, anything.
They just feed you the same stuff like YouTube is.
It doesn't challenge you. You've played this shite for far too long. You fancy playing this shite instead. That's what you wanted to say.
It's true. You're right. The algorithms are the thing just shutting it off, isn't it? They are the gatekeepers. Because you're right. You mentioned like with YouTube. I find that with YouTube is that unless you know a particular thing, you won't see it.
Unless you've stumbled across something outside of YouTube that leads you into a part of YouTube you've not seen before, you probably won't find it in the YouTube search anymore. And that's because it's become such a corporate driven environment now, and it's sad. It really is sad, because if essentially YouTube was the alternative to the crap we used to have to endure on terrestrial television. But it's turning into the same thing that it was set out to like defeat. It's really sad, and I don't want to end on a depressing note, but I feel like that's where we've gone, and that's why I think that us guys, for the majority, I'll speak for myself in it, but like I hark back to retro because of that, because the modern world for me just doesn't hit the itch I'm looking for. And if you want to find like it can go, you can talk about anything. You can talk about music, you can talk about movies. Unless you go digging deep in the recesses of the internet to find stuff that speaks to you, you won't find it on the fucking Xbox store or anything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally agree.
Yeah.
Right, gents, well, I went very philosophical at the end there, but I think we've covered most bases now, and I've really enjoyed the chat covering the sort of whole era of piracy. You know, we went from not doing it to really much doing it to not doing it at all. And it's been fun chatting about this with you.
Yeah, no, really enjoyed. Really enjoyed.
Yeah, cool. So thanks for listening, everyone. And I'm going to change Drisky's words and say, keep it copied.
Fantastic.
Keep it X-copied.
Yeah.
X-copied.
Copied that floppy.
I suppose we did cover it slightly with the preservation thing, but
sorry, I've just got a nick downstairs. Hang on, just give me a sec.
No problem, mate. Shall we wait? We'll just wait for Drisky. He's in the doghouse now.
That's it.
I remember, oh man, getting my first CD burner. I don't think I got it until sort of 2000. I think I got my first.
That's when I got mine.
Like you, it was a
'2.
burner, and I remember I was working for a reprographics firm in the late 90s, and I was trying to copy PlayStation 1 games on the kit they had there, and I could never get it working. But I didn't understand like ISOs and you couldn't just drag and drop the files from the disc to the.
No, you just make a data disk then.
Yeah, you know what I mean? I didn't understand all that. And I started booting the game up, and I got the PlayStation 2 logo. I'm like, yes, it's going to work. And then it just crapped out. It's like, what the fuck's going on here then?
Sure.
But yeah. I mean, to be honest, it's a weird one in that like a lot of the technical know-how I got, it all came from piracy.
I was about to say that yes, absolutely. My computer skills went up tenfold because of piracy. Yeah,
it's weird. It's really weird because I remember, like, basically, I left school an average student, like fucking C's to D's, because I was just a dickhead at school. But like, once I picked up a PC, and started reading on the internet, my English became miles better than it was at school, you know, and all this other lot. But like switching from the Amiga, obviously I love my Amiga and that, but like when I switched to PC and I got into all this other stuff, the technical prowess and understanding of things grew exponentially because of piracy, and there was obviously other things there, but piracy was a big part of it. It was really mad.
It was mental, wasn't it?
Hello, sorry about that.
That's all right.
The missus didn't have a key, so I had to